What's the timetable on forgiveness? We all know that we're supposed to forgive, right? To forgive is divine, but how long should it take? Hey, welcome to the I Am Podcast, where we talk about everything inner peace and you learn about awesomeness. I'm Sean Webb. Okay, so forgiveness. It comes to us from the German root vergeben, which literally translated means to give completely. That is kind of a side translation of perdonare from Latin, which means to release someone from punishment, which is where we get the word pardon. And I think that's kind of what we're doing when we forgive someone as well. We are releasing our need for retribution or punishment of someone who has done something to us. That's what we're doing when we forgive, right? And so, in looking at that a little closer, we're going to release a lot of wisdom about forgiveness. So let's look at the process from a little more granular point of view. What happens when the opportunity to forgive arises? What causes it? Well, the first thing is that we have a perceived attack on self, right? Something has been done to us or against us that has created whatever machinations in the mind that we then can eventually forgive someone for taking those actions, right? Well, let's look at that process at a little more microscopic perspective. What happens, we understand if we watched episode 2, episode 5, episode 6, we understand our sense of self from our mind's perspective, right? Our brain is this organ of survival. It must define all the things in the world to help us survive another day, to figure out where food is, shelter is, where the dangers are. And then another question must be asked, okay, if we're analyzing for dangers, a danger to what? Well, then we require a sense of self. We need to say, okay, well, this is going to be a danger to self. Okay, well, what is self? Well, let's start making a laundry list of all the things that we perceive as self. And the first thing that we put on the laundry list, our body, our senses, the thing that we see when we look in the mirror. Then we start to add ideas like our name and our gender and all that things it means to society. And then our family and friends, the things that are familiar to us, the things in our environment, the stuff that we own, our ideas, our religion, our politics, our ideas about the world and how it should be run, etc. All these things become a laundry list of self that basically becomes answers to the question, who am I, from our mind's perspective. It's not our true self, it's our false self. But basically this is 99.9% of the world walking around outside is dealing with and from their false self. Okay, so we have this false self within us, and someone creates an attack on this idea of self. They slap us in the face, right? Body is our idea of self. So they've attacked us, and we have a physiological response to someone slapping us in the face. Or someone attacks one of our family members, either physically or non-physically or emotionally or whatever. All of a sudden that creates an attack on self, as we perceive it or as our mind perceives it, that we then have an opportunity to forgive that person for whatever they have done to whatever it is on our laundry list of stuff that creates our false self. So there's the transgression. That's how it happens. It could be a slap in the face, or it could be as ambiguous and nebulous as a school shooter shooting up an elementary school full of kids. What is that attack? Well, that attacks our idea that kids should be protected, that we should have mechanisms in place that stop this kind of thing, that, maybe there should be stricter gun laws around elementary schools or whatever it is. All of those things can be attacked as far as our sense of self. So we have the action that creates the attack on self. Okay, now the next thing that happens, there's this thing in our body called homeostasis. It runs every one of our cells within us. And homeostasis is this thing that says, if everything's good, we're awesome. Just keep doing what you're doing. If everything's not good, then we need to take action to change something. And every one of our individual cells runs on this thing called homeostasis. And so when our sense of self gets broken up into these little bits that are stored within our brain cells, and something comes in from a perception of the world that attacks something in our sense of self, all of a sudden this homeostasis phenomena kicks in, and all of a sudden we have to rebalance the weights. We have to rebalance the scales. We have to gain power back. Something's been attacked on our sense of self map, and so now we have a natural physiological reaction that helps us into a place of, whoa, now I need to get you back. Now something needs to happen to you. Either we need to increase and rebalance the valuation that you've just attacked on me, or we need to devalue you and punish you to the point where your attack then becomes devalued as well. So that's a natural reaction that occurs that creates the whole need for retribution or punishment, that type of thing. Okay, still have the opportunity for forgiveness. So what's the point between point A, when something happens to us, and point B, where we can get to a place where we're ready to forgive? Okay, so basically what's happening between point A and point B is that we're rerunning it in our heads. We're on constant replay. We're thinking about all the various scenarios. First of all, we're like aghast. Oh, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that person did that to me, or whatever it is. We've got all those mind machinations running on based on this illusionary self that we have in our head. Okay, so then we run through all the scenarios of what we could have done better, or how we could get back with this person, or whatever. And so then we hold on to that for a certain number of days or weeks or months or years or a period of time. And then we finally get to a point of exhaustion where we're done holding on to it, where we're then ready as a self-defense mechanism to say, I'm going to forgive you for this so that I can move on, so that I can get rid of it. And so everything that happens between point A, the transgression against you, and point B, the point at which you're ready to forgive, is nothing but mind movement. Thoughts about it, holding on to it, thinking about it, not forgiving somebody, obviously, for it until you get to that point where you're ready to forgive. And what is that, though? Because we understand the attack on self is an attack on an illusory self. And the thoughts about that attack on illusory self are kind of wasted cycles at that point. But beyond the mental process, the mental recognition that we're holding on to an attack on a false self, when we get to the point of forgiveness, we're releasing the me narrative, the poor me narrative. And we're starting to give our perspective to the other person. What could they have been going through that caused them to attack me or create the transgression against me or whatever it was? Because Plato said, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a great battle. What he meant in that statement is that everyone out there is fighting against their own ego and their own battles within themselves. And so to understand Jesus's perspective of turning the other cheek, if someone slaps you in the face, turn the other cheek, give them the other cheek to slap as well. Well, how could we do that? Well, at the point that we're meditating, at the point that we're getting down into that space of our true self underneath the false self of the mind, where we're actually starting to understand, feel, and recognize and identify with that true self within us, at the point that we can see through the illusion of ego, any attack on that ego becomes immediately forgivable. Because as soon as you can see through the illusion of self, you can no longer waste time on the machinations of mind associated with an attack on that self. And so from Jesus' standpoint, when you're standing there and there's nothing that this person can do that will attack your true self, because your true self is immortal, it is the spiritual, it is the forever indwelling awesome energy that creates all existence, right? At the point that you're sitting there watching someone slap you even seconds before, they're attacking their perception of you, which is false. You're seeing an attack on your perception of you, which is false, your body. And at the point that you can see that, you can immediately forgive and not waste any time on the machinations of mind that would be required to get you to the point of immediate forgiveness. And so the forgiveness time frame goes from however long it would have been to 0, to immediate. So when somebody slaps you in the face, you can immediately see that they're struggling with whatever it was within them that caused them to need to strike out at you, and they're dealing with some kind of turmoil within them that maybe you don't have, that allows you to immediately turn the other cheek. Wow, what kind of pain and suffering must be going on within you to allow you to strike me to try to quell your anguish? Here, knock yourself out. Take the other one. Beat me up if you need to, if it will quell your pain and suffering to a point that we can get you to an even keel where we can start to chip away at that ego and maybe get you into an awakening space. Right? When someone attacks your sense of self, you need to be able to see that sense of self as a false sense of self, which will help you get through the machinations of mind that are required to get us to the point of forgiveness. Because when you don't require those machinations of mind, you don't require that chewing on it and that holding on to it and that thinking about it and that whole crap process, when you don't need that, you can immediately move into a space of forgiveness, no matter what someone has done to you, immediately upon them doing it. You know, Gandhi said, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. And there's a lot of wisdom in that statement, because the weak are the folks who let their ego drive the bus. It's tough. It's tough. It takes work to get down underneath that sense of self and root it out from within you. It's tough to be able to get your mind into a position where you can experience true self, at which point it supplants the false self. It supplants your ego. It shows it to you as illusion. Right? We can go into this from a mindful perspective and say, oh yeah, of course the ego is illusion and I shouldn't put any, but until you actually experience it, it's not going to stick. So that's why we've got to do our contemplative practices. That's why we've got to do our meditation. That's why we've got to do our yoga, our Tai Chi, our Qigong, or whatever it is that we're doing to get into that space where we tap into that true self that supplants the false self, because then forgiveness becomes a much easier game. And the time frame of forgiveness then reduces to 0. Because without our reduction of the timetable to 0, the timetable for forgiveness is basically how big our ego is and how powerful it wants to hold on to whatever's been done to us and put that in our storybook of self. When we devoid ourselves of that, we devoid ourselves of the timetable that it requires to get to forgiveness. And the awesome thing with that is, just like the Buddha was talking about picking up a hot stone to throw it at somebody, you're the one that gets burned. When you drop all the things that you're holding on to that have been transgressions against you, your life becomes a lot lighter and your existence a heck of a lot happier, and joy then can spring from within you, regardless of what people are doing to you. And how awesome is that? I love you guys. Not the false you, not the you that I don't know. I love you that I do know, the you underneath all your mind's bullshit, the spiritual existence, the joyful existence, the awesome existence that underlies all the mind's machinations. I love that you. If you guys want to support this podcast, you can do it by going to IamSpirituality.com, making a contribution there, and or getting a free book through our link, audibletrial.com/IamSpirituality. You can pick up any one of a number of awesome books, including Sam Harris, who's an atheist, who's coming at spirituality from an atheist standpoint, but he's into contemplative practices. Go pick it up. I think it's called Awakening, and it's talking about spirituality without the need for religion. It's an awesome book. Shows us that spirituality and science are all racing toward the same endpoint. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Peace.